You've likely heard the stories told in passing of kings and crusades, of battles and plagues. But the silence is loud when it comes to her, the woman, the midwife, the unmarried, the poor, the strange, the forgotten in the great cathedrals. Of Europe in the dusty courts of petty towns, her voice was never heard, because it was never meant to be. In the Middle Ages, to be a woman was to walk a narrow path, step even slightly to the side, and the punishments came swiftly, cruelly, and without mercy. Some punishments were public. Some were hidden in dungeons so deep, no sound escaped. Some were designed to break the body, others to break the soul. This is the story of those punishments. It's the ones they didn't teach you in school. It's the ones erased from the pages of polite history. It's the ones that whisper from the shadows and demand to be remembered. Tonight, we walk quietly back. Through the centuries, not to glorify violence. It's not to stir nightmares, but to understand what was done to women. Asterisk, imagine you are 19 years old. You've never been kissed. You work as a washerwoman, your hands raw from cold water. Your life is hard, but it's yours. One day, the local Lord Steward accuses you of theft, a linen cloth gone. Missing, you swear on your life you didn't take it. But you are poor. You are a woman. And that is enough. You are dragged before the magistrate. There is no lawyer, no witness, no defense. Now just a wooden bench, cold iron shackles on judgment. The sentence is passed quickly. You are to be branded. The hot iron will be pressed to your flesh, permanently marking you as a thief. For the rest of your life, anyone who looks at you will see that scar. It might be burned into your cheek, or your shoulder, or worse, your breast. This was not rare in medieval England and France. Branding was considered a fair punishment for women convicted of petty crimes, real or imagined, especially for the poor. The iron would often be shaped as a letter. T for thief, F for fornicator, B for blasphemer. And these weren't just scars, they were social death sentences. Women branded like this were rejected by villages, denied food, and sometimes attacked in the streets. Because punishment did not end with pain, it lived on the skin. A permanent reminder, a warning to others, and for many women, it was the beginning of a slow, invisible death. Asterisk, let us now move quietly to a darker room. This is not a courtroom. This is not public. There are no witnesses here. Only candlelight and the soft sound of iron tools being laid out on a table. The man standing over them is a torturer, wears no armor, no mask, just stained hands and a steady grip. Before him is a device shaped like a pear made of iron, heavy and cold. It is called the pear of anguish. There were different versions, some designed for the mouth, some for other parts of the body. The one meant for women's mouths was especially cruel. It was inserted into the mouth, closed like a fruit, and then slowly cranked open from the inside. Teeth shattered, jaws broke, tongues tore. It was used on women accused of speaking against the church, of gossiping, of sorcery, of seducing men sometimes. It was used just to teach a lesson. The real lesson, of course, was silence. Speak and suffer. Cry out and suffer more. No court records were needed, no laws cited, just suspicion, shame, silence, enforced with steel. This was not about crime. It was about control. To control a woman's body was to control her voice. And to control her voice was to erase her from the world. Asterisk, there was a name for a woman who spoke too much, who argued, who complained about her husband, who dared to question a man in the town square. She was called a scold. And in the cold justice of medieval Europe, scolding was a punishable offense. The punishment looked like something from a nightmare, a heavy metal mask, forged in iron, designed not to protect but to humiliate. This was the scold's. Bridle, it fit over the woman's head like a cage. Sharp metal plate called the bridle bit was placed inside her mouth, pressing against her tongue. If she tried to speak, it would cut. If she cried out, it would slice. She was paraded through the village in it, publicly shamed. Children threw mud. And women looked away in silence because they knew it could be them next. Some bridles had bells attached, so that every tortured step she took rang with humiliation. The message was clear. Be quiet. Stay small. Know your place. Niece. Bridles weren't used only in royal courts or great cities. They were used in villages, in Scotland, in England, in Germany. Anywhere a woman had the courage to raise her voice. The bridle didn't just punish speech, it punished spirit. Because in a world built for silence, the sound of a woman speaking her truth was treated like a threat. Asterisk, now walk with me into the edge of the forest. There, where the moss grows thick and the trees whisper, lives a woman. She knows the names of herbs. She helps deliver babies. She can ease pain with a tincture of willow bark and break a fever with steam and sage. She is a midwife, a healer, a woman of the village, but the church calls her something else, a witch. During the witch trials of the late medieval period, especially in Germany, Switzerland, and parts of France, midwives were among the most targeted. Why? Because they had power, and it was power not granted by men. They answered to no lord. They earned trust from other women. They worked in the sacred moment of birth, something the church sought to control. Accusations often came from fear, jealousy, or misfortune. Baby dies in childbirth. The midwife must have cursed it. A cow falls ill, so the woman with herbs must be to blame. And so she was taken, bound, dragged to court, tortured until she confessed to things she never did. They said she flew with demons. They said she danced in the woods naked. They said she lay with the devil. Sometimes they tortured her into naming other women neighbors, friends, even daughters, and then they burned her not, always quickly. Some places lit wet wood to prolong the suffering. Some tied gunpowder between her legs to hasten death. But make a spectacle. The smell of burning flesh was not the worst part. It was the cheering, the celebration of it. The belief that killing her was holy. She was a healer, a helper. But history remembers her as a witch, because men wrote the history. Asterisk, you might think that pregnancy was a shield, a woman carrying. A child might be spared, that her swollen belly would inspire mercy, restraint, some hint of humanity. But in many medieval courts, pregnancy was not protection. It was often just inconvenient. In England and parts of continental Europe, a woman sentenced to death could plead her belly. The court would halt her execution, not because they cared for her, but because they didn't want to waste the baby. She would be examined, usually by a group of midwives. If they found signs of life, if her belly moved or heartbeat was suspected, the sentence would be delayed, but only until after the birth. And in many cases, she didn't survive that long. Some pregnant women were tortured for confessions. Despite their condition, tied to boards, hung by their wrists, pressed beneath heavy stones, forced into stress positions until they could no longer stand or breathe. If they miscarried, the trial resumed. If they gave birth, they were executed the next day. There were recorded cases of women hanged the morning after childbirth, still bleeding, still trembling. The pain of labor was followed by the rope. The cries of their newborn drowned out by the silence of a swinging body in 1591 in Scotland. A woman named Agnes Sampson, a healer and midwife, was accused of witchcraft. She had already given birth in prison. She was stripped naked, her body shaved to find the devil's mark. She was tortured with a bridle, and her head was crushed with ropes until she confessed. Then they strangled her, burned her corpse. Her baby was left behind. Asterisk, the medieval world was built on a cruel kind of logic, that a woman could be punished for sin, even if the sin was simply surviving. Asterisk, not every woman was publicly executed. Some were simply forgotten, beneath castles, beneath churches, beneath the streets still walk today. There are chambers where light never touched the walls. These were the stone wombs of medieval punishment. Prison cells made not for justice, but for disappearance. A woman might be sent to one for reasons as simple as refusing marriage, denying. A priest, being too beautiful, or simply being accused. No trial, no judgment. Just a name written in a ledger, a door closed forever. In In these underground cells, women sat in filth, sometimes chained to walls, sometimes left to rot and standing. Water. Their hair fell out, their teeth broke, their minds unraveled. Some scratched prayers into the stone. Some whispered to imaginary voices, just to hear a sound. Some gave birth alone in the dark, the child dying beside them. They were not hanged. They were not burned. They were simply removed from the world, and when they died, no burial. Their bones became part of the foundation. Their only gravestone was silence. There is one truth that echoed through every stone hallway, every cold chamber, and every screaming mouth in medieval Europe: confess or die. But sometimes, even confessing wasn't enough. Women were often tortured not to find truth, but to break them, to extract names, to force shame, to turn them into examples. A woman accused of heresy, witchcraft, or immorality was rarely believed if she claimed innocence. But if she confessed, and she was condemned as proof of evil, it was a trap. Speak and they burn you. Stay silent, and they torture you. The inquisitors were patient. They believed pain revealed the soul. Some women were tied on the rack, limbs stretched until shoulders popped from their sockets. Others were subjected to the strappetto hung by the wrists behind their backs and dropped again and again till bone shattered. There was no limit. A confession under torture was legally admissible. A denial under pain was simply resistance. And those who gave in, those who whispered yes to sins they never committed, often did it not for themselves, but for their children, for the promise that the flames might burn them faster, or that their daughters might be spared. Some women gave false names, hoping the lies would be enough. Others chanted prayers with bleeding mouths. But the truth is this: the price of survival is destruction, and most did not survive. Asterisk, so what then was the crime? To be a healer? To be poor? Speak loudly? To not marry? To bleed? To birth? Simply exist. History rarely records the names of these women. We don't know how many. We'll never know all the faces, but the stones remember. The air in old cathedrals remembers. Dirt beneath Europe's fields remembers. Because for every woman who was burned, another lived in fear. For every woman who was tortured, another. Learn to stay silent. These punishments weren't only about pain, they were about power, about reminding half the population that they were fragile, sinful, and small. But they were not. They endured. And they endure still in memory, in story, in the quiet resistance of truth. So tonight, as you rest, know this: every law ever written against a woman's body, every cage, every fire, every silencing, was not her end. It was our beginning to remember her.